The studio lights dimmed slightly as the final segment of the Steve Harvey show was about to begin. The audience, already warmed up and laughing from Steve's earlier jokes, settled into their seats with eager anticipation. Tonight's episode had been filled with laughter, games, and powerful moments from guests with incredible stories. But Steve had been told by his producer during the last break that there was a surprise waiting for him. Something he didn't see coming. Something special. He raised an eyebrow, curious but unsuspecting. As the camera panned back to him and the applause faded, Steve leaned in toward the audience with that signature grin of his. "All right, y'all," he said, his voice smooth and familiar. "We got one last thing before we head out. I don't even know what it is. My team telling me to sit back and watch, so let's do it together." The monitor behind him flickered on. At first it was just static. Then the image came into focus, a dimly lit room, with someone sitting calmly in a chair. The audience collectively gasped. Steve's smile faded into a look of surprise. It was Keanu Reeves. The actor sat casually, wearing a simple black shirt, his signature long hair draped over his shoulders. He gave a gentle nod as if addressing an old friend. "Hey, Steve," he began, his voice low, warm, and genuine. "I know this probably feels out of nowhere. I'm not usually the kind of guy who pops up on talk shows without being there in person, but this was important to me." Steve blinked, his expression neutral but attentive. The crowd went quiet. "I've been watching your show for a long time," Keanu continued. "And not just the recent episodes. I remember the days back when you were doing the Steve Harvey Show sitcom, and of course, Family Feud. But what always struck me about you, beyond the comedy and the charisma, was how deeply you care about people. You've spent your life trying to lift people up, giving advice, sharing your story, and encouraging folks to keep going when life gets hard." Steve shifted slightly in his seat. The expression on his face began to soften. Keanu smiled faintly. "You said once, your setback is just a setup for your comeback. That stuck with me. You know, I've had my fair share of losses, Steve, my best friend, my girlfriend, my child, all gone in what felt like an instant. The world saw me as this quiet, mysterious guy, and that's fine. But grief was something I carried every day. And then, one night I was watching an episode of your show. You were talking to a young man who had lost his mother, and you said something. You said, 'Sometimes the pain you feel is God's way of reminding you that you're still alive, that there's more left for you to do.'" Steve looked down. His fingers were now interlocked on the table. He wasn't smiling anymore. "That hit me, Steve," Keanu said, now looking directly into the camera. "That sentence stayed with me. It helped me get up the next morning. It helped me go to set when I didn't want to. It helped me write a letter to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and eventually it helped me forgive myself for surviving." The audience was now silent. You could hear a pin drop. "I never got to thank you," Keanu added. "Not properly. So this is me doing that? Thank you for being real. Thank you for speaking truth, even when it hurt. You've made millions of people laugh. Sure. But more than that, you've made people believe in themselves again. You made me believe." There was a pause. The screen slowly faded to black, and the studio lights came back up. Steve sat perfectly still. He looked out at the crowd, eyes glistening. He tried to speak, but the first words caught in his throat. He took a deep breath and chuckled nervously, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "You know," he began, his voice unsteady, "I done been through a lot in this life. I done made some mistakes, had some wins, took some losses. But when somebody like that, somebody like Keanu, takes the time to say something like that to me, man, I don't even know what to say." He stood up slowly, pacing a little as he gathered himself. "I never met that brother in person, but I know his story, and I know the pain he been through. For him to sit there and say that something I said helped him." Steve paused again, exhaling deeply. "Man, that just reminds me why I keep doing this. Why I get up every day and show up here, 'cause you never know who's watching. You never know who needs to hear what you got to say." The crowd erupted into applause, but it wasn't the usual raucous cheer. It was warm, it was understanding. It was human. Steve looked toward the camera again, his eyes still red but his voice finding strength. If you out there, he said, pointing gently at the lens, and you're hurting, if you feel like life just keep knocking you down, I want you to know, just like Keanu said, there's more for you to do. You ain't done yet. And you ain't alone. He walked back to the desk, sat down again, and smiled softly. Keanu, if you're watching this, thank you, man. From the bottom of my heart, you didn't have to do that, but you did. And I'll never forget it. The camera slowly zoomed out as the credits rolled and the theme music played in the background. But even as the show ended, the moment stayed with the audience. It wasn't just another celebrity moment. It was something more. Something real. That night, social media lit up. Clips of the video began to trend under hashtags like hashtag Steve Harvey and hashtag Keanu Reeves message. People all over the world, from different walks of life, shared their own stories of grief, resilience, and healing. Steve's inbox flooded with messages from fans, celebrities, and strangers alike, all moved by what they had witnessed. The next morning, Steve was back in his dressing room early. He sat quietly with his coffee, thinking about the night before. His assistant knocked on the door, holding a small package. "This came for you," she said. Steve opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "Dear Steve, what I said on camera came from the heart, but I wanted to say one more thing. Maybe one day we'll sit down in person, no cameras, just two men who've seen some life. Until then, keep doing what you do. You're changing lives, one word at a time, with gratitude." Keanu. Underneath the letter was a small item wrapped in black velvet. Steve unfolded it carefully. It was a pocket watch, vintage, silver, and engraved on the back. "Time heals. Keep going," Steve smiled. He looked at the watch, then at his own reflection in the mirror. "You know what?" he whispered to himself, voice low and steady. "I ain't done yet." And with that he stood up, straightened his tie, and walked out of the dressing room with a heart a little heavier and a purpose a little clearer. The world kept spinning. People kept hurting. But somewhere between the tears and the laughter, a message had been shared. A seed had been planted, and Steve Harvey, funny man, wise soul, and unlikely healer, kept showing up, one story at a time.